for being here. I'm amazed every time I come back to Whitewater, and I see another building being built, and just the wonderful things happening at this university. I want to thank Dr. Parvatia and Dean Chenoweth for having me here today. We're speaking on a very important topic, and that's ethics. Today I'm going to focus on businesses that conducted their affairs in an unethical manner. I have some current examples. I have some examples of unethical behavior going back maybe 8 years and probably going back 15 years. And the reason why I'm doing that is because I want to impress upon everybody here that some things never change. And I also want to emphasize that in business does not have a corner or a lock on unethical behavior. Unethical behavior, unfortunately, is in every profession in this country. But I'm going to focus on business because most of you are, or all of you are business majors, and it's important to learn what happens when unethical behavior occurs and the consequences that it causes. I've seen it in my lifetime. I want to impress upon you in the next 25 minutes the price that unethical behavior can cause you, can cause shareholders, can cause leadership, and how it can really rock this country. So I always say, as you are looking to enter the workforce, don't only look at the money or where it's going to be. Always look at the type of company it is, the ethical makeup of the company. Don't be afraid to ask questions of this employer, what activities they're involved in, how they conduct their business, because once you join these companies, it's difficult to leave sometimes. You've got a mortgage to pay, you've got bills to pay, and sometimes finding a job isn't all that easy. So, and also an ounce of prevention is certainly worth your time to take the time to check out the company. So, I ask that you, after the session's over, ask any question you want from me. I've been around a long time on ethics, conduct in companies. It really doesn't matter what kind of question you want to ask, employment, whatever. Feel free to ask any question and just be comfortable, relax, and just please listen to what I have to say. So it's so important that we have the discussion of conduct and ethics in our universities to advance and emphasize the importance of positive ethics and put integrity, humility, encourage, and respect for one another, put into action as each of you enter the workforce and become the future workers, managers, and CEOs of business or whatever careers you take. Each of us has a responsibility to act with integrity and honesty in all that you do. A factor or factors as to why this is occurring in the business world today is the highly competitive nature of business today. It's a global economy. It's not just a national economy, it's a global economy. So we're dealing with other countries. And not every country conducts the business affairs the same way we do. It comes down to survival of the fittest. Get it done today no matter what happens. We can't allow the other guy to beat us to market. It's become a world of who can implement smoother, innovate better, and execute faster. Only the best will survive and thrive. Those who don't will become irrelevant or die. We'll discuss some recent examples of unethical behavior in corporate America and some older examples. Bottom line, sometimes we never learn. We are a nation governed by laws that were created to keep order in our country for the purpose of preventing chaos from occurring and helping to maintain a civilized society. If we violate those laws, We pay a price. For instance, if we steal or shoplift and get caught, you may pay a fine or even go to jail. At the very least, you will have a criminal record, and it may be difficult to get a job or retain a job. If we cause physical harm to someone, you'll probably get arrested, fined, or possibly jailed. If we drink and drive and get pulled over by a policeman, you'll most likely be charged with an OWI. If you harm someone as a result of drinking and driving or texting, the penalties will include fines and jail, and even worse, knowing that it caused injury or death to someone that could have been avoided. I'd go on with examples of breaking the law, but I'll stop there. I think you get my point. But what if we do something that doesn't necessarily break the law? Imagine a world without ethical boundaries, a world in which we're not breaking the law, but doing things because we feel it's really not going to hurt anyone or it's no big deal. For example, cheat on an exam, no one's going to know I need to pass this course. Fudging numbers at work so the boss won't fire me so I can look good or I can get a bigger bonus at the end of the year. Or pay for a movie and go to 3. Something as simple as that, or do shoddy work as a contractor. I'm in that business now and I've seen a lot of that. Or tell someone they need something repaired at a high cost when it could have been repaired for a reasonable cost. Or shed documents so no one will find out what I did or someone else did wrong. We've seen recent examples in the pharmaceutical world in which soaring prices for prescription medicines, which are becoming unaffordable for many patients. The high prices for many drugs, some costing $100,000 or more for a course of treatment, are straining the budget of insurers and government health programs. Executives at Valiant Pharmaceutical and Turing Pharmaceuticals have been buying up the right to those old drugs and then jacking up prices many times over what they had cost. Now, I've got nothing against business raising prices, but this action is kind of over the top. I think you've heard a lot about that recently. Or how about Automaker Volkswagen diesel emissions scandal, which has been dubbed the diesel dupe or Dieselgate. The EPA found that many VW cars being sold in America had a different device or software in diesel engines that could detect when they were being tested, changing the performance accordingly to improve the results. VW has admitted cheating on emissions tests in the U.S. About 11 million cars worldwide are fitted with the so-called defect device. What was VW's response? We've totally screwed up. Our company had broken the trust of our customers and the public. Yes, they did indeed. It's still unclear who knew what and when. VW must have had a chain of management command that approved fitting cheating devices to its engines. Leadership failed, bottom line. While shareholders have taken a beating in the loss of share price in Volkswagen, the real tragedy are the number of people who are involved and violated trust of so many people. Talk about a total disregard of ethical boundaries. In all fairness, I'm not sure how many people were pressured into capitulating or surrendering into the scheme. But ladies and gentlemen, it comes down to making the right choices in life. Sometimes the final decisions rest with you. Sally Krawcheck, CEO of Corporate Byte, says, if it comes down to your ethics versus a job, choose ethics. You can always find another job. Having said all that, profit is not a dirty word, but rather it's how we go about it. It is the lifeblood of any ongoing business. You need rising revenues and profits to survive and grow and create jobs. However, the examples of Valiant, Turing Pharmaceuticals, and Volkswagen are examples of greed and unethical behavior to the extreme. Somehow the culture of these companies lost its way. What was leadership thinking? The loss of shareholder value, loss of trust, as a result of unethical behavior and choices is just plain sad. For some leaders, a code of business conduct and ethics are just words without meaning. We'll look at some companies that were in the spotlight several years ago who ignored the rules of good business conduct and ethics. Do we ever learn? Unless our business leaders and employees follow the rules and guidelines of their corporate business ethics codes, they could end up just like Enron. Some of you were quite young when that happened. However, it's a classic case of what happens to a company when ethics is completely ignored. Enron, once a giant energy trading natural gas and electric utilities company based in Houston, Texas, employed around 21,000 people by mid-2001 before it went bankrupt. Fraudulent accounting behavior techniques allowed by their leaders, Kenneth Lay, now deceased, and Jeff Skilling, not sure if he's still serving a jail sentence or not, really ruined 21,000 lives and caused their share price to plunge to 30 cents and ultimately zero. Then there was Worldcom, led by Bernie Ebbers, another accounting scandal that created billions in illusory earnings. This is a company that had more than $107 billion in assets, far surpassing those of Enron. It improperly accounted for more than $3.8 billion in expenses. The result? Bankruptcy. The largest U.S. bankruptcy case at the time. Once again, employees' lives disrupted or ruined and shareholder value completely lost. Then there was Tyco. CEO Dennis Kozlowski and finance chief Mark Schwartz were sentenced up to 25 years in prison for stealing hundreds of millions of dollars from the company. How about a company close to us? Cost Corporation, you probably remember that. Their VP of Finance and Secretary went on a $31 million shopping spree that was unfortunately not discovered by auditors, which is unbelievable, and it almost sunk the company. Fannie Mae, Freddie Mac, their actions drove so deeply into subprime in their risky mortgages that there was no way out when the real estate bubble burst in 2008. And then there were the banks that were willing to lend to anyone that had a heartbeat, no questions asked. How much do you want? And yes, part of the blame must go to the consumer, who wanted a piece of the American dream by any way possible. Consequences, ladies and gentlemen, the story never ends well when good intentions are compromised. When business conduct and ethics are ignored, winner take all, ethics be damned, there are consequences. We all paid the price and are still paying the price of the financial meltdown of 2008 caused by greed. The irresponsible behavior of those leaders from Enron, Tyco, Worldcom brought down billion-dollar companies, ruined employees' lives. 401 plans became worthless because so many people had their 401ks tied up in company stock and shareholder value lost. When a culture goes from excellence based on a strong code of ethics and integrity to a culture based on self-gain, profit at any cost, one in which the end justifies the means, I guarantee you the ending will not be pretty. I want to talk about an example of something that I was involved with a number of years ago with our company. We had a situation in our offices where, as a result of an audit being conducted, we found that someone had been fudging the numbers. Not only were the numbers fudged, but 3 or 4 other people knew about what was happening. As a result, the president of the company called me and said, "Paul, would you fly to this particular branch and would you just take over this for the next couple of weeks?" Got in the plane, arrived there, and being with a company for 38 years, you know a lot of people. And as the president of our company was addressing our employees, talking about what happened, all those people in that room knew those 4 people that were involved in this. And the morale went from bad to worse. It also caused a great deal of problems for our company. They all knew what was going on, but they all hid it. I recall when we went to the hotel and the president of our company and I met with one of the individuals who was involved in this, he asked this gentleman, or the gentleman who was fired said, it wasn't my fault. I didn't do it, somebody else did it. And the president looked at him and said to him, he says, it's not what you did, it's what you knew and didn't do anything. So, being involved in this whole scheme, the person who did it, the people who hid it, caused damage for our company, for our reputation, and this person still didn't learn. It was somebody else's fault. That's why you can't get involved. When something like this happens, don't walk away, run away. I'm what you call a stock aficionado wannabe, emphasis on the wannabe part. That's why I play the lottery every night. I invest in stocks as more of a hobby or a pastime instead of the goal of making a ton of money. I've done pretty well, but curiosity about different companies, what they do, how they got started, how long they've been in business, what makes them tick really kind of interests me. I really try to examine a business prior to making my commitment. I read Barron's, I read Wall Street, I do research on the internet, I read their annual reports, or sometimes they help put me to sleep. When reading the annual reports, I look at their 5-year annual revenues, expenses, their EBITDA, I look at their competitors, I look at the 10K, and the innovation outlook. These are all things an investor should look at prior to making a financial commitment or selecting a stock. What you don't see in the financials is a line called business ethics performance. Or if you do see it, it's just a small line. You don't see it because you can't quantify that. You can talk about how honest you are. And I had a book that was written by Steve Barth, lawyer here in Milwaukee. And this particular company, matter of fact, it was Enron, had this wonderful business conduct book and talked about how ethically, what an ethical company they were, and had all these standards to live by. And so the words were garbage because leadership totally ignored them. But no company goes into depth or wants to go into any depth about how moral or honest they are. It's just assumed that management is trustworthy and management will always do the right thing. They will always choose honest practices when running their respective business. In conference calls to analysts, there is an absence of any discussion of code of conduct or behavior unless something happens. The discussion is usually centered on the performance of the past quarter or future performance. Ladies and gentlemen, the examples I gave earlier of Enron, Worldcom, Tyco, and Cost are just a few examples of destructive behavior. Yes, studying a company's financials, their competition, innovation are extremely important when considering to invest in a company. Nothing will bring down a company faster than corruption, a compromise of business priorities and ethics. You can fix performance, you can fix product, you can fix margins, but you can't fix a bad business ethics code. In most cases, quick enough to save a company. An example is Valiant Pharmaceuticals, which I mentioned earlier. Their stock price was $269. I think recently it's about $31. I think it went all the way down to $23. It's not the sales performance or profit. It was what happened that caused that stock price to go down. Anytime unethical behavior is practiced in a company, a lack of trust, shareholders run because they don't know how widespread it is, they don't know how deep it is, they can't believe the numbers, they can't believe what management says. I place trust, a strong code of business conduct and ethics, at the top of my list when grading a company, when hiring a prospective employee, when considering someone for a promotion. Each of you should consider a strong code of business conduct and ethics when seeking a career. Second thing I'd like to talk about is social responsibility of a company. We've talked about the consequences of bad business conduct. Let's talk about the good side of ethics in a business, one that focuses on many things that good businesses do right. I refer to that as social corporate responsibility. A strong code of business ethics is about choosing right from wrong, obeying the law. It's that and more. It's about how we treat others in the community. It's about how we treat our fellow employees. It's about what we give back to the community. It's about respecting the environment or environmental ethics. I've talked about this book and company in person in my past 5 or 6 talks here, and quite frankly, I can't find a better example of a company that touches on all those points I just mentioned. It is a book written by the founder and owner of Patagonia. His name is Yvon Chouinard. The book is called Let My People Go Surfing, The Education of a Reluctant Businessman. He also has an hour talk he gave at the University of California, Santa Barbara, viewed if you go on YouTube. It'd be worth your time. But in the book, he points out 2 areas of corporate responsibility, internal and external. Internal, it's a company's responsibility to treat your employees well. You should focus on the employee before anything else. Patagonia gives sufficient time off to its employees, allowing them to recharge themselves. Patagonia is financially sound, no funny accounting practices here. Mrs. Chouinard opened up one of the first office daycares. It benefits her business, but also creates a sense of worth. Here's how it pays off for them at Patagonia. They get hundreds and hundreds of resumes every day. People want to work for Patagonia. Then there are the external responsibility. It is when the product of a company produces, it's when a company that a company produces does the least amount of harm to the environment. Mr. Chouinard went to his individual supplies, and although cotton is a product that grows naturally, he realized cotton growing does a lot of harm to the environment. He found that synthetic fibers were the best to use because they do the least amount of damage to the environment, because it used the least amount of fossil fuel to create the fiber. Public service. If you get the chance, and I encourage each of you to commit to doing some public service. It'll make you feel great by giving back to your community and helping others. I guarantee it'll make a positive difference in your lives. Several years ago, I had the privilege of serving on the Capital Campaign Steering Committee to raise funds to double the size of the Ronald McDonald House in Milwaukee. We completed the expansion a couple of years ago, and the new Ronald McDonald House was able to accommodate twice as many families. Well, I'll talk about a great feeling. America, it has a culture of excellence. It is a country that provides the means for anyone to succeed if they really want to. Excellence and opportunity. These are qualities that separate us in our economic system from the rest of the world. It's when at any cost, by any means, where the means justifies the end, that crosses the line from an ethical culture to a corrupted culture. There can be a fine balance. It doesn't take much to tilt the scales. We saw that in a few examples I discussed earlier in my talk. One individual, one bad apple can do enormous damage to an institution. Stephen Covey wrote a book a few years ago called The Speed of Trust, the one thing that changes everything. In the book he states, trust is so basic to business that it is rarely discussed in an analytical and accessible way. The more trust within a company, the faster it can move with lower cost. Think of the adverse impact 9/11 had on at the time and cost of air travel. Longer lines, more security because of the damage it did to trust. He goes on to say in his book, integrity, without integrity, you have no foundation on which to place trust. Covey defines integrity as being honest, telling the truth, and leaving the correct impression. Beyond honesty, integrity requires three things. Congruence, behavior consistent with your values inspires trust. Humility, what is right has to be more important than being right. And courage. When the right action is hard, integrity requires courage. Trust is so integral to our relationships that we often take it for granted. Again, trust is so integral to our relationships that we often take it for granted. And this is a quote from Christopher Reeves, the Superman character who tragically passed away back in 2004 as a result of a final spinal cord injury. He writes, "Our greatest human challenge is to behave according to our beliefs, to do the right thing, to practice what we preach, hold yourself high standards, and continually evaluate the image you see in the mirror. It will build your character. Respect. Treat others with dignity and make sure your behaviors are respectful. It will make you a person of quality. Courage. Follow your conscience instead of following the crowd. Choose rightness over what is easy or convenient." We all have that little voice inside us that will guide us. If we shut out all the noise and clutter from our lives and listen to that voice, it will tell us to do the right thing. One of my personal heroes was my past boss, Carl Eller. He literally wrote the book on integrity. This is an individual who rose to the top and also hit bottom, but he never forgot the true meaning of ethics. Carl was president of Combined Communication, which was at the time, the largest owner of television, radio, outdoor, and newspapers in the late 70s. He was president of Columbia Pictures at one time, board member of Pabst-Burry, one of 40 founding fathers of Phoenix, Arizona. University of Arizona Business School was renamed the Eller College of Management some years ago. He's a founder of the Fiesta Bowl. He was also a founding investor of the Phoenix Suns. He developed the largest publicly owned convenience store chain, 4,641 Circle K stores in 32 states. Circle K went bankrupt, and so did Carl. He never gave up. He stayed focused, he regrouped, he formed Eller Media Company, and later sold his company to Clear Channel Communications, which is now known as iHeartMedia. In his book, he says, and let me read this here. Honesty is a business person's most important asset. Nice people may not always finish first, but honest ones do, mainly because honesty creates trust, the lifeblood of all enduring human relationships, whether in business or anything else. And what makes honesty and trust possible is practice, unfailing repetition, also known as integrity, the ability to stay true to yourself without compromising your values. Stick to your guns. Whether you win or lose, behave with integrity. It will give you the richest payoff possible in life, the inner peace of the honest person, The happiness that comes with knowing you'll never be ashamed to face yourself in the mirror. In conclusion, I have a great quote from William Clement Stone, the great businessman and philanthropist. He says, "Have courage to say no, have the courage to face the truth, do the right thing because it is right. These are the magic keys to living your life with integrity." Thank you. Do you have any questions? It doesn't even have to paint it integrity or ethics or whatever, but if you have any questions regarding business or whatever. Okay, go ahead.
Have you ever been in a situation where you're pressured to make an unethical decision?
That's a good question. I can't think of any. I really can't. Maybe it's because I never invited it. I don't know. I think it happens to some people because there are signs of weakness, or they see something in a person that, hey, I think I can connive with this person or something. So that's a good question. But boy, I tell you, sometimes you don't know what's coming at you. Sometimes it can be too late. Sometimes you can be involved without being involved. It's a very clumsy situation. So the best advice I can give any of you is to really talk to the employer and ask questions about how they conduct their business, what public service they are involved in. Ask them a theoretical question that might show their ethical inclination. So yeah, it's interesting. This particular example that I talked about before, one of the managers, the senior manager, knew about it, knew what happened, knew what this individual was doing, and didn't come forth. And while he didn't do it, he didn't say or tell anybody what was going on. Eventually comes out. I can honestly say that it eventually comes out. I've seen it over and over and over. I only gave you one example. We had thousands of employees, but take the time when you do your interview to ask those questions. And I'm not sure what questions you want to ask, but there are plenty of questions you can ask that will give you a hint of, hey, maybe this is not going to work out. Because you don't want to join a company for 2, 3, 4 months, a year, waste your time. Well, I was just telling Professor Praveen that I need to cut back a little bit. I'm on the Lou Mahone Foundation in Kenosha. They give out scholarships to students, real diversity students, not necessarily A students, B students, C students, but young men and women that want to go to school, but they can't afford it. So this is a foundation that seek scholarship money to help those young men and women to go to college. $2,000 here, $3,000 there helps, especially families that weren't born with a silver spoon. The other one I just really joined last year was ECE, which is Educational Credential Evaluators. What they do is they evaluate students or professional people coming into this country, they review their credentials, so they, you know, the credentials show they really are who they say they are. More and more universities are subbing that out. I'm not sure if Whitewater has that, but more and more universities are subbing that out because there's a cost involved to it. So when someone says they want to become a lawyer or practice medicine in this country, that agency checks it out. I was recently appointed chairman of the Wisconsin Better Business Bureau Foundation, and I'm on their executive committee. Every year we hold a torch award, and we give out scholarships to college, you know, people that are looking for extra money, and I encourage you to look into that. Go on the Better Business Bureau website. We had 400 applications. We're selecting 10 of those to receive scholarships. They're called integrity scholarships. About 2 years ago, I concluded my stay in the steering committee for Ronald McDonald House. Ronald McDonald House is really a neat place. They have 32 rooms, and we were turning away families every night because we just didn't have room. You know, the family would get a call and say, you've got to take your child to Children's Hospital or some hospital in the Milwaukee area. And this is true for most Ronald McDonald houses, but the one in particular in Milwaukee, Wauwatosa area, just did not have enough room to accommodate. So we put together a steering committee and we raised about $10 million to double the size of the Ronald McDonald House. So now we're really able to accommodate twice as many families. So if you drive by there, it's a beautiful house. And we have corporations probably every night, people devoting their time to serve families who are just preoccupied with their little one. I remember a few years ago we had a family who was in town and they were in a terrible accident, and the child stayed at Children's Hospital and was being released. Well, the family had no place to go. And I remember the father talking to the administrator at that time, and she says, don't you worry about it, you stay here as long as you can. So there's a lot of goodness in this world, and seek it out. Become a part of that. It makes you a better person. It's great for networking. It's great. It's great for you know. And I want to talk. I had asked Dr. to talk about this, and we'll get back to this. But about 4 years ago, we had a session here called Leap Year, and we did a simul broadcast with Cal State University, and it really focused on what students should do to get a job, to become a better applicant. And we focused on, well, these are 10 things that I came up with. Just a little bit of advice. So, be like Apple or Samsung. Innovate, reinvent yourself constantly. Invest in education, educating yourself. Make yourself relevant. I'll talk about that. Stay in tune with ever-changing processes, systems, technology. Technology changes. Self-development classes. I want to keep this card out. Your first job will probably not be your last job, but it may have a lot to do with determining your career path. We had a gal in our office some years ago. I keep saying a couple of years ago, it's probably 10 years ago, I don't know. But she was in proof of performance, which was just a job where she'd go out and she would take pictures of our outdoor signs. But she showed a real keen interest in marketing. And she was very sincere about that. And we listened to her. And sometimes it just takes small opportunities seriously, and she became a marketing assistant. I'm not sure where she's at today, but she went from being a proof of performance photographer to a marketing assistant. Pursue career choices early on. Attend job fairs. Ask questions to job fair employers. Network. You may not find the career choice you want, but it will allow you to inquire. You will never know until you get out there. There is a great skill sets needed, but going unfilled. I talked to a number of these people at these fairs, and they say, we've got so much opportunity for these young people, but they're not stopping by. You know, the world has changed. Attend these job fairs, ask questions, meet with these prospective employers, because you never know, it may be something that you take an interest in. I don't know. But there are plenty of opportunities out there. Take advantage of that. Think global. If you can, attend a semester overseas as possible. I know it's not cheap. My son had the opportunity to study in London for a semester. He had 15 plus young adults in his class with a very, very diverse background. Most of them spoke 3 or 4 different languages. He said, Dad, I got to tell you something. I found out who my competition was. These are people that are, you know, it's a global economy. You know, and you're competing against a lot of smart people, and you got to find your edge. And, you know, in this country, we usually speak maybe 1 language, possibly 2, whatever. Depends upon, you know, your ethnicity and where your family is from. You know, there's a lot of competition out there. I talked about community involvement, volunteer outreach. Join a service organization, join a community organization. Do charitable work. Give back to the community. Start young. This is what I wanted to say. You have to tell a story about yourself, otherwise you are not unique. What makes you stand out from the crowd. It's also the right thing to do. Great networking too. It's very important. You know, there's a lot of resumes, okay? You know, employer gets all these resumes from a lot of people. And I remember Hurricane Katrina, which occurred in 2005, and one of my son's very, very good friends became very involved in the cleanup of Hurricane Katrina, spent a lot of time down there. And on his resume, he noted that, you know. It starts a discussion with the employer. Employer sees that. They see what else you're doing other than just going to college. You've got to make yourself unique. You've got to make yourself relevant. And this really helps. It's a great way for an employer to start a discussion, conversation with you and with them. And it demonstrates a lot about you as a person and what you care about. You know, you didn't spend your time just going to college for 4 years. I'm not saying it's easy, but again, I keep on talking about competition. Make yourself relevant, make yourself stand out from the crowd. Am I going over time? Okay, good. Jeff Jarris, I think he's former CEO of Manpower. I think he just retired recently. I don't know, but anyway, he is or was CEO of Manpower. Says being a lifelong learner is crucial for employees. Every few years, you need to go back to universities for classes, to brush up on their skills, to learn new things. If you can't embrace lifelong learning, your job will end before you want it to end. Don't stop here at Whitewater. Try to do everything you possibly can to keep yourself relevant and educated. Communication and writing skills, technology. Great leaders speak and write well. hey, Twitter and texting and Instagram and all those apps that I can't even think of, emails, don't take the place of good writing and good communication skills. When looking for business leaders, you have to have those basic skills. I don't have to tell you, technology, it will continue to change and will continue to play a larger role in everything we do. Keep learning. LinkedIn profile. Have a LinkedIn profile and keep it up to date. I can't tell you how important this is to HR. It tells and informs the world about you. I had an appointment last week in Chicago with a client who I'd never met. Well, I studied up on him. I saw what he looked like, so when he entered the restaurant, I went, "Hey, Tom, how are you?" You know, and we talked a little bit about his credentials, about where he was, what he did. So it really kind of struck up this conversation. I'll tell you how important it is. A couple of years ago, when we were hiring a salesperson, I was talking to our HR director out of San Antonio, and she says, "I don't think we ought to hire this person." I went, "Wait, you know, he's got experience. He's got this and that." He doesn't have a LinkedIn file. We don't know anything about him. You know, it's one of those things you got to have. And the fact that he didn't have a LinkedIn profile reflected poorly on him. He wasn't hired. Keep it current. Every time I take a picture of myself, my hair grows grayer, but anyway, whatever. Oh, accept change, expect change, roll with the punches. If you can't adapt when you're young, it will be difficult or impossible to accept change as you get older, believe me. That's why I try to stay as involved as I possibly can, because you learn every day how fast the world is changing, and you want to be on that escalator kind of with everybody else, you know. 5 hiring attributes Google looks for. Number 1, learning ability, the ability to process on the fly. It's not IQ, and it's not expertise. Learning ability, the ability to process on the fly. It's not IQ, it's not expertise. Leadership, when faced with a problem, you're a member of a team. At the appropriate time, did you step in and lead? Humility and ownership. What can we do together to solve a problem? Without humility, you aren't able to learn. Collaboration, adaptability, number 4. Number 5, loving to learn, which I talked about earlier, and relearn. Laszlo Bach, Senior Vice President of Google, says, beware, your degree is not a proxy for your ability to do any job. The world only cares about and pays off what you can do with what you know, and it doesn't care how you learned it. Last but not least, always conduct yourself with the highest integrity. When looking at companies for a career choice, look at their leadership. Look at how they conduct their business affairs and how they treat people. Those are companies you want to work for. So, hope that helped. So, do you have any other questions? Just throw. Yes, sir.
So at the beginning of the presentation, you talked about choose a company to work for on how ethical they are rather than how they are paying you. So what would you suggest for students who are graduating with so much student loans debt, choosing pay or ethical?
To have them pay for that, or to?
No, like how would you give a suggestion to a student who's graduating with so much student debt? Should they
Yeah.
choose the pay, or should they choose how ethical the
Well, my youngest son and my daughter-in-law are going through that right now. They've got quite a bit. I'll decide very quickly. Never choose the money. Always choose ethical, because when you work for a company that's unethical, you don't know what's coming at you. Okay? Sooner or later, you might be involved in that unethical behavior, or you might be a victim of it. Okay? So money is always secondary to ethical behavior. It's just, just run away from, there's too many choices out there for you people. There's just too many choices out there to settle for anything less than an ethical company. Now, unfortunately, you may find out after a while that they're doing things that aren't ethical. You have to make a decision. Am I going to stay here? Is this eventually going to involve me? Do I really want to work for an unethical company? So always choose ethics. I think I mentioned earlier this project from Corporate Bytes said, let me get that out again. She put it so well put. She says, if it comes down to your ethics versus a job, choose ethics. You can always find another job. Can't put it any better than that. Just stay away from anything that smells rotten. That's why you got to do your job. When you're looking at a company, look at a lot of things. Look at, how they conduct their affairs, their past history. Just don't only look at the money. You have a right to ask those questions. You know what? And I think if you interview with an HR director or leadership, if they're any good, they're going to respect you for that, to ask those questions. And that's why I say community service is really important, because it really gives them a snapshot of who you are. You're someone who cares. And if they're an unethical company, they won't care about how much public service you did. Believe me. Does that answer kind of the question? Okay. Kind of. Okay. Any other questions, huh? Okay.
Thank you so much for all that.
Thank you.